We're with the Perry Township Historical Society, and we kind of put together a thing with LongAcre where people could come and reminisce about it. And tonight's the night. And look at this. Look what we've got here. This is amazing.
First, I want to say thank you for having me. You know that you've reached a certain milestone in your life when your parents are now considered historical. I'm just glad that I haven't reached that stage yet where I'm historical yet. I don't even know where to begin on some of this stuff. I've got mountains of stuff, stories to tell. What I thought we'd do is tell a little bit about the background, a little bit about my mom and dad, and then you guys can ask questions. We'll show some pictures and then you can ask questions. And I'm sure stories will come out. You have stories, you have insights and things that you know about that I don't know about. I'm 57 years old. I grew up. LongAcre was my backyard. I lived down there practically all the time. That's where I had my first jobs. My dad and some mom were similar, just about married to this business. This was their life for 26 years. And so I want to tell you a little bit about them, and then you can be free to ask whatever questions you want, because I'm sure I'm going to miss stuff that's of interest to you. My parents, Rufus and Violet Dodrell, are both now deceased. My dad died in '94, my mom in 2000. Wonderful folks, any of you that knew them. My dad was knowledgeable on a multitude of subjects, even though he had one semester of college. He was self-taught, a businessman from the word go. When he was in high school, he had a paper route with over 500 customers on the Near East side of Indianapolis, making $40 a week in the Depression as a high school kid. So he had his own car. Even though his parents didn't have any money, he was able to find ways to make money and develop businesses even at an early age. When he went to World War II, he served in Patton's army as a corporal in the infantry. When the war was over in Europe, he didn't have enough points to come back, so he had to stay for another year. And it was during that time period that his partners, his father and another man, decided to go into business together. My dad had saved up some money, and so they were looking for a business. And it was during that time period they thought that LongAcre Park might be that business. They were also looking at another pool, Broad Ripple Pool. And so my dad tells the story. He says both businesses were about the same price, $100,000. They were both making just about the same revenue. And my dad was in favor of Broad Ripple because he was a North Sider. He thought that would be the better choice. But by the time he came back, the decision had been made, and LongAcre was the business. And he added a little note. He says, that first year we ran that business, he says LongAcre made $30,000 and Broad Ripple lost $30,000. And so it turned out it was the better of the business choices. A little background. LongAcre was, the park itself was actually the remnant of ground, the waste ground that was left over from a subdivision called LongAcre Subdivision that was platted by Edwin E. Thompson, that Thompson Road is named after. And one little side note, the E in Thompson is Elbert. If you know where Elbert Street is, that's named after his middle name. And he decided that, well, maybe a swimming pool might work down in this area. And so there had been a swimming hole over on Lick Creek that the whole community had used. And he said, well, why don't we just take the deepest part of that and kind of put a wall around it and let the creek flow through it, and we can kind of have a fancified swimming hole and maybe have a little bathhouse and make a little bit of money off this. And so it was in 1926 that they started that? Well, there were problems from the get-go. The water stagnated. It was not filtered in any way. The Board of Health got all over them. The bathhouse was actually too small despite all the problems. And so they decided to expand it. And I believe it was 1926 is when they built the bathhouse that was the frame and stucco with brick on it with the gables that you're going to see in some of the pictures here. And that bathhouse remained until 1960 when it burnt down. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that. Now, where did LongAcre get its name? That's an interesting story. When Thompson subdivided the land, he divided it into long lots. They were 100 feet wide and 400 feet deep, or in essence, a long acre. They were roughly an acre of ground. Well, they still hadn't ended up on the name until he and his wife went to New York City, and they were thumbing through the phone book looking for a number of a friend of theirs, and they saw the LongAcre Exchange on the telephone, and they thought, that's what the name needs to be. So those two things became the source of the name LongAcre. Let's see. Building the pool. When Thompson started building the pool, he had workmen out there, and they started with the deep end. The deep end is where the swimming hole used to be. You'll see a picture up here that has a notation on it that says the old swimming hole. That's not correct according to my father. My father said that the deep end was where the old swimming hole was, and that's where they started the pool. Well, he had no plan for the pool, so each day he'd come out to the workers, Thompson would, and say, well, let's take it a little further that way. And so they'd build some more walls. And he'd come out the next day, well, maybe let's curve it around a little bit over here. And the next day, a little bit more over here. No, we got to go out a little wider here. And finally, one day, he said, that's enough, boys. Let's finish it up there. And that's how LongAcre got the shape it has. There was no plan. There was no design. And at that time, it had a concrete wall around it, no concrete floor, and no filtration system. So it was really like swimming in the creek in many respects. Later on, when my dad owned the place in the 50s, the concrete walls started to fall apart. And he had to build a concrete wall inside of the wall that Thompson built. And then they put a concrete floor in it and did some other stuff to it. The reason the walls collapsed is he used gravel and sand out of the creek, and it had a lot of mud in it. And the walls started to deteriorate and fall apart, and so it was one of those things. Thompson lost interest in this place after the first year. He went on to doing he was a lawyer by trade, and his wife was the one that actually ran LongAcre Park from 1926 to 1946 when my dad bought it. So she was kind of the iron force behind this whole thing and kept it going for many, many years. Let's see. Too many things. Originally, LongAcre was 60 acres when my dad bought it, and there was an additional 25 acres to the north of Lick Creek that he also purchased. So all together it was 85 acres. If you see pictures of it, modern day pictures, the interstate goes just to the north of Lick Creek there. Well, that was one of the problems later on with LongAcre was when the interstate went through, it subdivided the land right down the middle. And it removed a lot of the potential growth areas for picnics and stuff like that. And it severely impacted the park. But that was one of the issues through the years. I remember my dad fighting that thing like crazy, but eminent domain, they basically took it and said, here's what it's worth, and they went through. And I think we're probably glad we have an interstate around the city. It just, it's disruptive when it happens. Let's see. The bathhouse. The bathhouse that most of us, the one that burnt down, was a building of about 100 feet by 100 feet. It was a large building, brick on parts of the outside. If you remember, it had ivy growing up one side. Downstairs there was 1,000 lockers. My dad built lockers down there out of some old wood. They had upstairs a maple floor that was used for square dances. At one time he had an arcade in there with billiard tables and a few other things. But Saturday nights were the square dance night, and it was rented out for square dances and other parties and stuff. And so there was always a crowd there. Let's see. Some of this is kind of jumbled up because I don't even know where to start on some of this stuff. The number of people that used to come to LongAcre. When my dad bought it in the 40s, all through the 40s and 50s, a big day was 1,500 to 1,800 people coming through the pool. And that was a large number of people. But by the 1950s, the place really started catching on. And there were Sundays when there were 7,500 people that came through the pool. And some of you, if you're ever there on one of those busy days, it was wall-to-wall people. But it was one of those things where you looked around, you knew you were part of something really cool going on. This was the place to be. This was a place where you met your friends. This is where you could drop off kids and they could swim all day and you knew they'd be safe. There was roughly 75 people that worked there during the summer, keeping the grounds, working the refreshment stands, being lifeguards. On a busy Sunday, there'd be 20 lifeguards in rotation in the pool. You'd have 40 minutes in the chair and 20 minutes out to rest and kind of recoup and stuff and show off and do whatever else you do. It was a common thing for the lifeguards to put on contests off the 20-foot diving board, doing can openers and cannonballs to see who could make the biggest splash. And some of the big football players would come down there and they'd be doing this thing, and so the lifeguards would have to show everybody up. But it was a great time. The pool itself. The pool, if you put a mark on one side of the pool and then ran a tape measure all the way around the pool, it went for 1,000 feet. So it really truly was, the pool itself in another sense was larger than 1 acre. So it was a very, very large pool, held 1,200,000 gallons of water. And originally, my dad said when they concreted it in, even when they had the filtration system, they would pump water out of the lake into the pool and then run the filters until they could filter it all clean. Now, there was a reason for that. There was no city water down there. All right? In the 50s, 59, city water came to the area. Up until that time, you got water pressure in the toilets, in the bathhouse and everything because there was a 3-inch thick cypress tank that Thompson had built or had bought and put on top of a little platform up on top of the hill where everybody parked. And that, they filled that up with water, and that provided the pressure for the water, held 15,000 gallons throughout all the complex there. My dad said it was hell because on busy Sundays, the water would run out. So they'd have guys that would literally walk through, men and women that walk through the men's and women's side with buckets of water flushing the toilets. So when city water came in, it was a wonderful thing. From that time on, they started filling the pool with the city water. And I can still remember times when they'd have a pool all fixed up. They left the water in the pool over the winter because it helped with the freeze and thaw in the pool. And it seemed to hold up a lot better. And so they'd have to drain the pool in late March. They'd have to patch it, completely repaint it. Once it was done, they got a fire hose off the nearest hydrant and opened it up into the pool. Now, the water company threatened to sue him if there was ever a problem, like somebody's house was burning down and there was no water pressure, but nothing ever happened. He had an engineer check it out, and he says, you know, they don't know what